The Packers need to admit their shortcomings and their wrongdoings this offseason as they approach the draft and they approach free agency and negotiations, restructures with some of their vets. They need to understand what they've done wrong when it comes to building this team. I'm not saying the youth movement is a failure. I'm just saying the youngest team in the league's never won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying go sign a bunch of 35-year-old skill position players, but go get somebody in their 30s at wide receiver. Go get a proven cornerback. Go get a proven defensive lineman for some depth. And maybe you go ahead and advance your opportunity and advance your chances to bring it to that next level here in 25. Brian Gutekunst has done a really nice job at many things during his tenure as the general manager of the Green Bay Packers. He made the bold decision to draft Jordan Love, which seemingly has worked out, despite what happened on Sunday for Love. This past offseason, signing Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs, those were the two best players to wear the G this season. Great signings. But now that you are free of the cap hell that Aaron Rodgers left you in, and you finally have some money to play with this upcoming offseason, you need to go take some more swings. It's fine making the postseason. It's fine, maybe winning a playoff game every couple of years. But the expectation is championships. And Brian Gutekunst and company need to go back to the well this offseason and make some moves. Whether that's T. Higgins, I know is the name that's been thrown around 100 times. Whether that's Devontae Adams on offense. Or if that's DJ Reed at cornerback. You need to go make a big swing at some of those positions that will bring you to the next level. The receiving corps just didn't take the step we expected them to. And now, obviously, that's going to linger into next season with Christian Watson's ACL injury. How much better does your depth chart look if all of a sudden Jaden Reed is your second best receiver, and when Christian Watson returns, he's your number 3 receiver? Romeo Doubs is your 4th, and Dontavian Wicks is your 5th. Looks a little bit better. Gives you a little bit more confidence that you have dudes in that room. If you have a Devontae Adams making his return, leading the charge offensively, and being your number 1 receiver, I think defenses are a little bit more worried about what you can do outside. I saw the quote on either Monday or Tuesday earlier this week. Keyshawn Nixon saying he doesn't want to return kicks anymore because he wants to be CB1. And granted, he played a little bit of CB1 when Jair Alexander left with his injury, and ultimately his season ended following that surgery. Keyshawn Nixon was thrown into that role. You would prefer he's not playing that role. If you go draft a corner in round 1 and he pans out, which I know a lot of Goody's first-round picks haven't, and you sign a veteran cornerback, you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with that position of Keyshawn Nixon as CB3 rather than CB1. So while Goody and company have done a nice job constructing this roster with young guns who are outperforming probably the timeline that they expected when they built this roster, it's time to take some big swings. Year 3, quote-unquote, of this quote-unquote rebuild is Super Bowl expectations. You went from 9 wins to 11 wins. It's time to gear up for championships. Right? This offseason is huge for Brian Gutekunst. Matt LaFleur, yes, he had his shortcomings too. When it came to some of the play calling, some of the time management, some of the challenges, etc., he had his shortcomings, but he's a good head coach. It's time to give this good head coach the right pieces for the recipe so he can make a 5-star meal. This team's good enough. They have the pieces. And as they continue to develop, right? Think about the Tucker Crafts, the Jaden Reeds, the Carrington Valentines, the Rasheed Walkers of the world. Some of these second, third-year guys that are ready to take that next step, and we expect them to. Doesn't mean they will, but we expect them to take that next step next year. Put the right pieces around them. You likely have to find a center, whether that's through the draft, whether that's already on your roster. You got to add a wide receiver, you got to add a corner, and you could use some defensive line depth. You're in a good spot at tight end. You're in a good spot at running back. Quarterback, obviously, you're in a good spot. But you need to admit your wrongdoings. You need to admit your shortcomings, face the music, and address them this offseason. and go into July's training camp date with the expectation of it is time to win a freaking Super Bowl. No more 7 seed, no more wild card exits, no more divisional round bounce outs. It's time to get to the NFC Championship and win it. And this offseason is a huge one for Brian Gutekunst. Those are some of the spots I'd like to see them address. Those are some of the things I'd like to see them upgrade. Not to say those are the only things they need to upgrade or could address, whether that be through the draft or elsewhere. But that's the way I view it right now, as it stands a couple days removed from the wild card loss. Hunter, go ahead.
What if, let's hypothetically say this offseason, the Packers, their biggest kind of starter move that they make in free agency is getting a guy like Odigizua, the D tackle from the Cowboys, who's going to be a free agent. He's an interior pass rusher. But then the rest of those position groups that you mentioned, they really just get like, they're veterans, but they're still kind of younger guys, and they're more just depth stuff. Like they added some extra depth at O-line. They don't really get a top-end receiver. Are you feeling okay because they at least got a starter in one position, or is this they have to get multiple starters this offseason?
No, I think depth is actually receiver I struggle with, because I would like them to go get a top-end guy. And look, T. Higgins is going to cost a lot of money. And I brought this up yesterday on KBN. The last 2 years, Packers fans have criticized Christian Watson because he's been injury-prone and has missed a lot of time. The last 2 seasons, 23 and 24 combined, T. Higgins and Christian Watson played the same amount of games. Now, very important detail. T. Higgins had many more receptions. I think it was about 500 more yards and 8 more touchdowns than Christian Watson did. So he's much more efficient, and he's a better wide receiver than Christian Watson. But are you willing to pay top dollar for that guy when you still have some of those really good pieces, right? Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson are all good pieces. But are you willing to pay top dollar, or is it I don't even know a name off the top of my head to bring up, but somebody that's kind of, maybe not a clear-cut number one receiver, but can just add to that depth. At least you take the shot on it, right? Corner, I think, is the more important position to me, that you want that top guy. But I see George chimes in on the YouTube chat and says, I'd rather fix the pass rush than the cornerback room. An effective pass rush can make any decent corner look great, which I agree with. But when it comes to facing Justin Jefferson twice a year, when it comes to facing Amon-Ra St. Brown twice a year, when it comes to facing DJ Moore or Roma Dunze twice a year, I'd like a lockdown guy, right? Jair was that. I just don't anticipate he'll be on the roster next year or be a viable option next year. So I'd like to find somebody, maybe not to the level of Jair, but close to the level of Jair, that can play that corner position really well. That's where my concern goes, and that's where my head goes. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with it as long as they're taking swings, I guess, Hunter. I don't want them to sit still like they've done so many times in the past, especially in free agency, and just say, yeah, we're good. Because we saw they're not good enough, right? As the roster stands today, it is not good enough to win a Super Bowl.